You guys don't need to worry about me getting revenge from Diddy. I've got 3 moves that make sure he'll never be able to come after me or my family. First, I personally reached out to the victims' legal teams. The real reason he's not getting out is those buried cases working behind the scenes. I provided legal funding for 7 victims who had been silent for years and brought in the top criminal attorneys in the country. Second, I bought up every potential post-release business deal he had lined up. I planned this 2 years in advance. So by the time he got sentenced and still had hope of getting out, every partner had already cut ties with him. Third, I don't just have evidence, I've got backups. This is an entire minefield that's been buried for 20 years. I uncovered every secret from the last 3 decades with testimonies from the victims themselves. We interviewed over a dozen people he tricked, threatened, or violated. You think that's harsh? No. He destroyed other people's lives for decades. I'm just making sure he spends a few extra years in prison for it. I'm not afraid of his people, not afraid of his threats. I know he's still in there fantasizing about a comeback, but the truth is he's never coming back. Do you regret ever getting involved? I didn't have a choice. It got bad when I was about 15. He was known to be at Diddy's white parties. And then Aaron Carter told us about his brother. He said that because he came forward with this information, people were coming after him and trying to silence him. When 50 Cent unveils a documentary focused on what remained hidden for so long, the conversation shifts beyond speculation. It becomes a closer examination of why certain stories stayed buried. By tracing the rise and decline of Aaron Carter and placing his experiences alongside the influence and power long associated with Diddy, the documentary raises a more uncomfortable question, not simply who is aware, but who chose to remain silent. As familiar figures such as Justin Bieber appear along the edges of overlapping timelines, the film points toward a pattern extending far beyond any single individual. An entertainment industry where influence was often shielded by silence and difficult questions went unanswered for years. If the signs were visible all along, what kept people from connecting them sooner? Sean Diddy Combs has been drowning in both criminal and civil lawsuits ever since his indictment, and the storm doesn't seem to be letting up anytime soon. Recently, another wave of accusations has been leveled at him, a staggering 25 lawsuits alleging inappropriate relationships with younger individuals. And while whispers about his past connections with Justin Bieber and Usher during their early careers have been circulating for months, a new and shocking name has entered the conversation: Aaron Carter. Aaron, who allegedly first met Diddy at just 9 years old, is now being linked to allegations that have ignited heated discussions across social media. When 50 Cent builds his documentary around what remained concealed, he isn't revisiting old rumors. He's revisiting timelines. The project presents silence as part of the story itself, questioning why certain accounts faded into the background while influence continued to grow around them. Rather than focusing only on what happened, it examines why some narratives stopped moving forward and who benefited while attention remained elsewhere. It feels like every time you think you've heard it all, another layer of darkness gets peeled back. With the way things are unfolding for Diddy, this might just turn into the scandal of the century. Aaron Carter was once the golden boy of pop, a wildly talented child star whose meteoric rise to fame was nothing short of remarkable. He was only 9 years old when he dropped his self-titled debut album, captivating audiences everywhere and securing his place as one of the biggest child stars to ever grace the music industry. Carter was tipped for a long and successful career, but as bright as a star burned, it faded just as fast. Fame at such a young age takes its toll, but there was so much more that contributed to the collapse of Aaron's career. Several insider sources have suggested that he may have been a victim of manipulation and the toxic culture that allegedly ran beneath the surface of the industry. By revisiting the rapid ascent and eventual struggles that so often accompany child stardom, the documentary presents Aaron Carter not merely as a public figure, but as an example of visibility without adequate protection. His story becomes part of a broader examination of how young talent can be exposed to immense pressure while lacking meaningful support. If silence was never truly neutral, the film asks a difficult question: who gained the most from keeping that silence in place for so many years? Aaron, how are you holding up? I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Yeah, staying strong. It's been 8 months of a lot of turmoil and back and forth, but at this point I think I've got it under control. I'm doing everything I need to do, just focusing on my music, that's my passion. And really just taking care of myself. A lot of people in the news, there's hundreds of posts from media, and they all said I'm 165 pounds. But when I checked into rehab last time, I was 117. Same weight that Michael Jackson died at. I got my weight up and I kept it the whole time. I've managed to turn my life around. I'll be able to purchase houses, flip houses, be a real estate mogul, do touring. So you're buying and flipping houses? Yeah. And this one's actually up for sale right now. Christy Lucas is my real estate agent. She's like a big sister to me. She got me my first house, only about a mile away from here. Flipped that one from $420 to $620, made $200,000 profit. Then I bought this one for $620. Aaron Carter's rise began long before he had the tools to navigate the demands that came with fame. The documentary places his early success within an industry that often profits from youth while postponing accountability for its consequences. It traces the growing tension between opportunity and vulnerability, suggesting that access and attention can gradually become forms of dependence. The broader message is difficult to ignore. When a young person's worth becomes closely tied to performance, warning signs are often dismissed as the cost of success rather than signals of deeper risk. The film ultimately asks a troubling question. When does the pursuit of achievement begin to outweigh the responsibility to protect a child? First and foremost, all the companies. This man never put anything in his own name. It's either his mother, his son, his kids. He had 18 companies generating revenue, and nothing was really in his name. Is there some kind of tax evasion? They're looking at that. And then you've got people in the industry who have been saying for years that this man was having sex with underage individuals. So now the federal government is looking at it like, when is somebody going to come forward? We have this alleged information, but nobody's willing to step up. And then they go on. Shakur Stewart, mysteriously dead, supposed to be a self-inflicted wound. A person who had everything going for them. Kim Porter, dead. Somebody's car gets blown up. This guy is walking around threatening actors, threatening people. Somebody has to get involved. If it isn't the state, let it be the feds. Somebody has to stop him. He's lucky that God gave him the opportunity to be stopped while he's still alive. He didn't have to go out the other way. He's got a chance to repent now. Change his life. You mentioned minors, and a lot of people have been trying to drag Justin Bieber into this situation because of some suspect-looking videos with Diddy and Bieber, making a lot of allegations. The same way they made allegations about Usher. The documentary repeatedly focuses on proximity, examining who occupied positions closest to influence and who controlled the pathways to opportunity. Diddy is presented not as a final answer, but as a recurring figure within narratives involving mentorship, exclusive environments, and industry power. Rather than making direct claims, the film concentrates on connections and patterns, suggesting that influence is often exercised through relationships and informal networks rather than official titles alone. Its broader argument is that responsibility can become difficult to define when power operates between clearly established roles. If accountability exists within those gray areas, how can institutions effectively identify where responsibility begins and ends? Do you regret ever getting involved? I didn't have a choice. It got bad when I was about 15 years old. Because when I did MTV Cribs, the day I had to go show off that house, my mom and my dad told me they were getting a divorce. And I still had to go do it. I had to go show off everything in my life that was about to be taken away from me. One of the documentary's most striking themes is its examination of the many moments when Aaron Carter publicly expressed distress and reached out for support. Rather than portraying these simply as personal struggles, the film presents them as a record of someone attempting to communicate fear, loneliness, and growing vulnerability in real time. By revisiting these public statements, it encourages viewers to consider how visible signs of hardship were witnessed by millions, yet rarely addressed in any meaningful way. Beneath the headlines was a person increasingly aware that something around him felt deeply wrong. They said he died from pneumonia. You know, just like Kim, just like Brittany Murphy, pneumonia ain't no joke. Every time somebody starts telling the truth about someone, and whoever's been lying just says a little prayer, and then the pneumonia comes. A lot of people have been getting that lately. I'm surprised they didn't try to say that about Liam too. The documentary presents the issue as extending beyond any single individual, suggesting that responsibility becomes widely dispersed when warning signs unfold in plain public view. Audiences observed, media platforms circulated the content, and countless conversations took place, yet meaningful intervention often appeared absent. By highlighting this dynamic, the film raises broader questions about the role of institutions, communities, and public spectators when someone's distress is visible on such a large scale. If signs of struggle can be seen by millions, who ultimately bears the responsibility to recognize them and act? They say he went over that balcony on his own. But there are two other things I considered, and this is all speculation. None of this is confirmed. What if somebody told him he had to jump? What if jumping was preferable to whatever he was facing? Or maybe the danger felt so imminent that it seemed like the only escape. And it was found in his autopsy. That's not alleged, that's a fact. That's wild. Liam Payne's fall, there are a lot of alleged circumstances, a lot of speculation surrounding his personal life and health. What does any of this have to do with Diddy? All of those kids from that era, even the British fans, they all partied with Diddy. It's just hard to process. By expanding its focus beyond a single story, 50 Cent's documentary links individual experiences to a larger entertainment culture in which young performers often found themselves navigating environments designed and controlled by adults. The film suggests that these circumstances were not isolated, pointing instead to recurring patterns that appeared across multiple careers and generations. It highlights how several young stars moved through similar circles of influence where expectations were often unclear and safeguards were treated as assumptions rather than actively maintained protections. Through this wider lens, the documentary encourages viewers to examine not only individual outcomes, but also the systems that allowed such conditions to persist. To truly get invested in what's happening with Liam Payne, because I haven't gotten over what happened to Nick's brother, Aaron Carter. A lot of people keep forgetting that Aaron Carter was begging for help, begging for independent financing, begging for security. He made it very clear that Sony was out to get him, just like Michael Jackson had told him they would be. And right around that time, his brother had just been accused in connection with one of the girls from making the band Diddy's Entity. They were trying to make all of that disappear. And Aaron called his brother out. And then the next thing you know, he said, "If anything happens to me, I did not do this to myself." And then he was gone. And they said he took his own life. Just like they're saying about Liam Payne. Why doesn't anyone want to see the same thing happening over and over again? Because if Diddy is responsible for Liam Payne, then he is without a doubt responsible for Aaron Carter. This is where mentions of Justin Bieber begin to surface, not as a direct comparison or allegation, but as part of a broader discussion about recurring patterns in the entertainment industry involving young performers. When similar circumstances appear across different eras and generations, the question naturally arises, can repeated patterns still be viewed as mere coincidence? You know, it's like 150 hugs. You're a public person as well, and there was one instance in Harlem where his reaction when people walked away said everything. That moment where he felt he needed to wash, like he was dirty, that shows you his character. That's one of the moments where he forgot he was on tape. How do you respond to people who say this is more about your pre-existing beef with Sean Combs than it is about giving victims a platform? What they consider a 20-year beef is really just me being deeply uncomfortable. When he once suggested he'd take me shopping, I looked at it like a test, like a maybe you'll come play with me type of thing. And it wasn't personal. I also think it's important for people to know that this show is not entirely made up of perspectives from people who disliked Sean. We weren't just going after salacious details. The real goal was to tell a story, and not everyone who participated needed to have a direct allegation to be part of this project. The four-part series also features two jurors from Combs' trial who are speaking publicly for the first time about how they reached their mixed verdict, finding Combs guilty on 2 prostitution offenses, but clearing him of racketeering and sex trafficking charges. Both spoke about their views on the relationship between Combs and singer Cassie. Juror 75 described them as two people in love, while Juror 160 noted that domestic violence was not among the charges. Cassie, is she a victim in all this? I believe she is. She came in as such. She was 18, 19 years old when it started. Over time, she became conditioned to it. The goal of what the film is trying to do is to let the audience come in and ask their own questions. Were certain decisions colored by bias, and who got the benefit of the doubt in that courtroom? Do you think hip-hop culture was on trial as much as Sean Combs was? No, not at all. Look, if I stayed silent, you'd interpret that as hip-hop being fine with his behavior. The documentary portrays silence as a system sustained by loyalty, fear, and the desire to protect reputations. It argues that many of the adults surrounding young artists may have observed enough to raise concerns, yet chose not to speak publicly while insisting they didn't have the full picture. This dynamic creates a form of collective responsibility in which accountability becomes difficult to trace, yet the consequences remain very real. When many people hold fragments of the truth but stay quiet, who ultimately bears the weight of that silence? Never-before-seen footage of Sean Diddy Combs in the days leading up to his arrest in New York last September has now surfaced. The exclusive video obtained by Netflix shows Combs in debate with his lawyers over strategy. How did 50 Cent get hold of footage of lawyer meetings? Isn't that privileged? You could argue that because someone was filming and others were present, privilege may have been waived. I learned that through my own appeals case. I've never filmed any of my own legal meetings on purpose, precisely because filming can compromise that privilege. So I'd assume that's how they're getting around it. He was filming conversations with his lawyers, whether they knew it or not, and once that footage gets into other hands, the privilege is gone. I'd want a lawyer to confirm that, but I have to be honest, I'm shocked. You'd think it would all be protected. But listen to me, I'm going to get off the phone right now and let you professionals look at the situation and come back to me with a solution. No matter what anyone says, you're not working together the right way. We're losing. The footage itself, the way he bosses around these high-powered attorneys, is incredibly revealing. Part of a new highly anticipated docuseries by director Alex Stapleton and executive producer 50 Cent, titled Sean Combs, The Reckoning. Was there anything that surprised you watching it? I think it was surprising that he actually filmed it. It was very interesting to watch a man known for his brand presence, someone with a real knack for marketing, thinking about how he was coming off to the public. We kind of saw it coming though, because throughout the footage you could see he wanted to control everything, even using his own kids to post birthday messages. This guy wants to control the narrative at all times. The exclusive video also shows Combs in Harlem, greeting fans. He just lights up. He thrives in it. Barely anyone there, but he's acting like the whole city came out for him. Like the quarterback who could never graduate. And then, right after hand sanitizer, got to take a bath, I've been out in the streets amongst people. He's genuinely horrified by the contact. Like it's something he has to endure. I have to do it. A significant turning point emerges when speculation begins to give way to formal procedures. Legal teams, documented filings, and structured investigations replace public commentary, creating a more measured but serious tone. The documentary highlights this shift with restraint, focusing on process rather than sensationalism. Allegations are examined carefully and claims are weighed against available evidence. From a legal standpoint, this distinction matters. It separates public suspicion from formal accountability. If credibility often depends on institutional validation, why did it take so long for that framework to emerge? $15,000, you can sit here and tell me you're going to pay me for my time. So one thing led to another, and I said forget it. I spoke to 50, and then she told me, and these were her exact words, 50 does not determine what goes in and out of this documentary, and he definitely doesn't decide what somebody gets paid. It's not his documentary like that. I was like, if it's not his documentary, and I spoke to him the way I did, I don't need to be doing anything with you. because I was doing this on the strength of him, but you're going to pay me if I do it. It went back and forth for a while. Then they had Kirk Burrells calling me. What are you calling me for? I know what kind of guy you are. Me and you are cool and everything, Kirk, but don't call me about business with this. And then what I found out was that he was cutting a deal for himself and Tim, while I was trying to get a deal for all three of us. That's how industry people operate. So then he called me back again and I told him, listen, don't ever call my phone again. Because we had gotten into it before about somebody calling him. He told me Groovy Lou had called him wanting to know why Gene was still talking about Puff and everything. And I had mentioned it on the Gene Deal show. Then he called me back like I was lying. Yo, listen to me, Kurt, don't call me about what these people are saying, bro. And especially don't call me talking about what I need to fix when you know exactly what you told me and what our conversation was. So the whole reason I'm not in the documentary, the lady was talking disrespectfully to me. She had no right. And then she told me that 50 didn't really have the power to do anything, but they were using his name to push the whole thing. That's what it was about. So that's why you won't see a cameo from me, other than the pictures they used in the film. I've seen them myself, maybe 3 or 4 times where you can see me in different places. That's the only thing you're going to get. But the stories they told in that documentary, they could have gone so much deeper. They could have done so much more. I'm not in it because of that director. Alex, you know the name. The documentary highlights why so few individuals chose to speak publicly. Raising concerns often came with real professional and personal risk, while staying silent frequently protected reputations and opportunities. 50 Cent is presented as someone willing to face that criticism in order to encourage further scrutiny, not because he claims to have all the answers, but because he keeps asking why certain issues remained unexamined for so long. Rest in peace, Aaron Carter. You actually called me the other day to break the news to me. And this is someone we both interviewed multiple times. I was shocked. How did you feel when you heard? Yeah, I was definitely shocked. But I mean, I had interviewed him maybe a week and a half before he passed. The interview came out 3 days before he died. And when he came in that time, he definitely was not in a good mental state. You hadn't interviewed him for about a year before that, same as me. I kind of interviewed him regularly for a while, then took a long break, and then he reached out and I thought, let me check in and see how you're doing. He came in, it wasn't great. He was drinking lean. In the interview? I mean, he tried to deny it, but it was super purple, double cup. I don't know what else it would have been. He was slurring his speech, and I heard that he and his girlfriend broke up again about 2 days after we filmed because she was there the whole time. And some of what we talked about was really heavy, him having his kid taken away by the state. At one point I'm trying to tell him, you've got to get your kid back, man. You can't be thinking about anything else right now. And then I start to think, that's probably not a great idea. He's not really in a state where he could have focused on that anyway. But his girlfriend was there with him. So how did he lose his kid if she was still around? I guess the child went to live with the grandmother, taken from both of them. I don't know if his girlfriend had her own issues or if it was entirely him, but they did get into a big fight at some point. He tried to blame fans reporting him, saying he was on drugs and all of that. But I was really urging him to make getting his kid back the only priority. I can't imagine being in that situation and thinking about anything else. But he was deep in his addiction. And one thing I thought was interesting, and it's kind of gone unnoticed, is that in that interview, he fully apologized to his brother Nick. He had said so many times that Nick was a rapist, that Nick had done all these terrible things. But in the interview, he basically acknowledged, I was taking somebody else's word for that. I don't actually believe it's true. I was like, so you've been smearing him for years based on one person's word? I don't know. But then a clip came out of a Backstreet Boys performance where Nick completely broke down talking about losing him, and it hit different. I'm sure Nick, to some extent, had felt haunted by it, having his brother try to tear down his career for years with these accusations, and then to see him go before they ever really had the chance to reconcile. In my interview, Aaron said he wanted to reconcile with Nick. And I thought to myself, that's still a long way off. There's going to need to be some real distance between the accusations and any kind of acceptance. But yeah, it's just a deeply sad ending to that story. In its final moments, the documentary avoids simple conclusions. Rather than assigning definitive blame, it focuses on the tensions between celebrity and protection, influence and accountability, speculation and documented evidence. The film encourages viewers to look beyond what may have happened to Aaron Carter and examine the broader environment that surrounded him. It also explores why figures such as Diddy and references to Justin Bieber continue to surface in wider discussions about power, influence, and the treatment of young talent in the entertainment industry. Ultimately, the documentary leaves audiences with one overarching question: when institutions are finally forced to confront their own practices, will meaningful reform follow? Or will the same patterns simply take on a new form? If this story moved you, drop a comment below and let us know your thoughts. And if you want to keep following stories like this one, make sure you're subscribed. There's a lot more to come.